But we move on to our Kraken, who I talk about consistency. I talked earlier with the Seahawks about self-inflicted. That's been the case here for our Kraken. We'll go over the past week with the games here. Starting in Chicago, on November 28th, the Kraken lost at the Chicago Blackhawks by a score of 3-4. This one was a really sloppy one. Two of the goals that Seattle allowed were just really bad defensive blunders out of their respective positions, just giving things up to a Chicago team that's largely struggled and is in a rebuild. I just talked about a rebuild. Two of those goals, not great. Philip Grubauer probably should have had those. He's coming off of an injury there. You wonder maybe he's not fully back from that injury, but still, regardless, you've got to be better defensively in front of him, and you've got to be better on the offensive end of things. So a frustrating one there to lose to that Chicago team. Our player of the game forward, Matty Beniers, one of the better games from Matty, at least statistically and with the underlying numbers. 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, 4 shots, a 1 plus-minus, 1 block, and 1 hit on the day for the reigning Calder Trophy award winner. Following that first game of that road trip, the team would head out to Toronto to battle the Maple Leafs, one of the deeper teams, well, not necessarily deeper, but one of the more talented, star-studded teams in all of the National Hockey League, with Austin Matthews, with William Nylander. Seattle put up a good fight. They did go down by a 2-goal deficit into that third period. They would storm back and force overtime with Toronto. They got some great looks in overtime, but did not put them away against Maple Leafs goaltender Joseph Woll, and would go to the shootout. And if you've been following this team at all, either this season or the last 2 seasons, you know that they have struggled heavily in the shootout, only winning 1 shootout over the course of the past 2 seasons. And that would continue here as neither of the players that were sent out in the shootout were able to score for Seattle in this one. And Mitch Marner, who scored a hat trick for Toronto, would add a 4th goal in the shootout and give his team the lead. So basically it was Mitch Marner versus the Seattle Kraken, and the Kraken lost. Our player of the game for Jared McCann, 2 goals, 2 points, and 4 shots on the day. Jared McCann, nice contribution here. His first goal of the game was Seattle's first. It's a power play goal, got him coming downhill, and really was able to unleash his wicked one-timer and get that goal there. His second goal tied things up and really helped put an emphatic stamp on this game for Seattle. Really had them moving the right way momentum-wise, but ultimately could not finish out the deal. It's also a little bit funny considering that Toronto was the team that left Jared McCann exposed in the expansion draft, leading to the Kraken signing him there. So you lose the first 2 games of the road trip, both of them close, both of them by a score of 3-4. And you go into a game against the Ottawa Senators that seems winnable. Ottawa has struggled as of late. Goaltender Anton Forsberg has struggled this course of this season. And Ottawa shuts out Seattle. A score of 2-0. Seattle didn't necessarily play bad defensively in this game. It was just 2 mistakes that gave up goals. The first one being Matty Beniers fell over with the puck right near the goal, and a Senators player was right there on the spot to pick up the puck, and considering that he was right in front of the goal, make a move and get by Joey Decord. And then the second one a little bit later, Joey Decord went to play a puck behind the goal, was not able to really get it out. There was some miscommunication between him and his defenseman, as Joey wanted one of his defensemen to come and play the puck. The defenseman thought he was going to play it up the ice. Ottawa jumps on it, was able to get the pass up to the middle of the slot. Decord does get back to his goal, but there is a Senators player backdoor who's able to get a pass from that high slot, or that middle slot, and shoot on basically a wide open net for that second goal. Seattle struggles offensively. They did have some spurts in this game, but ultimately spurts don't put goals on the board. Results do, and Seattle gets shut out. So as you know, with shutouts, we don't do a player of the game. It's like the Mariners offseason, it's coming to a point where I don't know. The Kraken were doing a lot of good throughout the course of this season, leading into this 4-game road trip, with that game in Chicago, and then those next 3 all in Canada. Um, it's just always one step forward and 2 steps back with this team. Was saying 2 steps forward and 1 step back because the Kraken, a lot of their game has largely been good. This Senators game is a good example of that. Defensively, you didn't look bad. Excuse me, you didn't look bad defensively. You generated some decent numbers on the offensive side of things. Decent, but could have been better. I know that. Um, but because of some silly mistakes that you gave up, the Senators get 2 goals, and that's the difference. You couldn't put up 2 goals to answer them. You gave them those 2 goals. You gifted them a win, essentially. Um, so it's starting to come to a point where you're wondering, does something need to change? And for a while, a lot of the fan base has said there needs to be some big change, whether it's a coaching change or it's a trade, signing some guy off the free agency list. And I pushed back on that a little bit. I thought, hey, they're doing a lot of good. They're just not getting the luck. And the advanced numbers, expected goals above average, seem to prove that, seem to suggest that, seem to support that for this Kraken team. But the underlying numbers won't result into points ultimately all the time. And Seattle's getting to that point where it's like, hey, are you going to be able to survive on the loser point from overtime and find your way into the playoffs? I mean, hypothetically, you could potentially, but the struggle to string wins together, to find that form, to find a full 60-minute hockey game, to find the relentless effort that you showed throughout the course of the last season that made you so dangerous to anybody in the league, including beating Toronto in their home building last year on that amazing road trip, shutting out the Boston Bruins in the middle of their record-breaking season in their home building. Going into those buildings, beating these great teams in the National Hockey League came off of that effort, that drive, that layer after layer of forward line and defenseman pairing. And I push back in the idea that it's because you lost that fourth line of Geeky, Donato, and Sprong. I push back on that because we've seen what this team can do offensively throughout the course of this year in spurts. It's been more of an effort thing, which is, as I talked about earlier in the show, if it's effort and discipline that are hurting you, it's more frustrating than anything because this team has talent on it. Don't get me wrong. It has talent, but it's effort that continues to fail them throughout the course of this season. And that's something that they can control. I don't know when it gets to the point where extremes come into play, considering the injuries that you've had, which we'll get to in a minute. Throughout the course of the year, there's some patience, I guess, but with the way that you've struggled this year so far, and the fact that you're struggling even with such a weak West, such a weak Pacific Division, just adds more frustration onto the pile that is at this current point in time. So, as I mentioned with no news, please. Thank you. As I mentioned with talks of injuries, thankfully, Andrei Burakovsky is not in a red non-contact jersey this morning for morning skate, as the team does play tonight in Montreal. But we've got other news. So on the 28th, Jaden Schwartz left the game late into that contest against Chicago with a lower body injury. It was designated at that current time from Kraken PR. Did not return to the game. He was almost immediately listed as not returning to the game. That morning, Andrei Burakovsky was seen skating in the red non-contact jersey with the team, but obviously more of the attention is paid on Schwartz. On the 30th, the team officially placed Jaden Schwartz on injured reserve. He is expected to miss approximately 6 weeks with an upper body injury, which is interesting because the replay that was shown in the loss to Chicago saw Schwartz in front of the Kraken bench playing a puck off of his skate, just kind of to control it, and then kind of saw him wincing, and then okay, thank God. That's news, but it's not necessarily urgent. See, I told you things happen during our show. He took a puck off the skate and started to wince and kind of bent over and immediately went down the tunnel. So you would have thought maybe it was a lower body injury, but the official designation from the Kraken said upper body injury, 6 weeks. So that will mean that Schwartz will be missing the Winter Classic. Unfortunately, some Seattle's best contributor on the power play and a big reason for their whatever success they've had this season on the offensive side of things. And you lose a leader, you lose a veteran leader. So that's it's a very tough loss for the Kraken. And there were respective roster moves with it. The day that he left, the team had recalled forward Marian Studenic from the AHL Coachella Valley Firebirds. Over the course of 15 games with CV, Studenic had scored 6 goals, tallied 5 assists for a total of 11 points, a 3 plus minus, and only 4 penalty minutes. So he's a disciplined fella. And then on December 1st, the day after Schwartz was placed on injury reserve, the team recalled forward Max McCormick from the HL Coachella Valley Firebirds. And as a result, forward Andrew Podorowski was reassigned to the AHL Coachella Valley Firebirds. The McCormick move is a little bit interesting. Bring him up for Schwartz. It seems like the Kraken weren't necessarily too impressed by what they got from Podorowski in his time up with the Kraken, which is a little disappointing. I mean, excuse me, after his last stint with the team just a week ago, there was hope, excuse me, again, that Podorowski would be able to get into a game. He did so. He's got some offensive touch in his game, but wasn't able to display too much of it, obviously being on the fourth line. So McCormick, in 16 games with the Firebirds so far this season, he's also the captain of the Firebirds, tallied 8 goals and 9 assists for a team leading 17 points, a 3 plus minus, and 11 penalty minutes, including 2 power play goals. What is that? His 8 goals is also tied for the team lead, and his assists at 9 are third on the team. So McCormick has been involved in a game with the Kraken, albeit during the inaugural season, which feels like so long ago. It's interesting. He was in line rushes with the team this morning, so he overtakes Studenic's spot. It'll be interesting to see if he gets into the game tonight, considering that he was in line rushes. I would imagine so. We also have some updates on notes for the Winter Classic. The rink will begin to be built on December 18th at T-Mobile Park. And there will be a 2-day fan festival labeled the NHL Fan Village that will take place from the 31st of December to the day the Winter Classic takes place on January 1st at the north parking lot of Lumen Field. That north parking lot also saw some of the MLB Play Ball Park festivities from the MLB's past All-Star Week earlier this year. Again, making sure nothing else is happening. So cool to get more Winter Classic news and updates on what's going to take place over the course of the week, because that Winter Classic, obviously the game is one thing, but there's different events throughout the course of the week, including practices and such that will take place there when that ice gets built. So yeah, it's a tough slate right now for the Kraken. I mean, as I've said, you're looking for consistency, you're looking for a consistent effort, you're looking for a 60-minute hockey game. And we've been talking about that basically since the year began, which isn't good. So the Kraken currently sit at an 8-win, 11-loss, 6 overtime loss record, which is good for 5th in the Pacific Division at 22 points. The next game is tonight, December 4th, at the Montreal Canadiens. That's a 4:30 p.m. puck drop. That game is on Root Sports. It's the final game of a 4-game road trip. Montreal does have some talent on their roster. They have been better this season than they have in the last few years. Seattle needs a win. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They need to turn things around, and they'd like, more than likely, a happy flight home. Then, after a few days, Seattle will fly home, and they will begin somewhat of a lengthy homestand in the middle of the month of December, starting with their December 7th game versus the New Jersey Devils with a puck drop of 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. That game is on ESPN. Then, following that, 2 days later, it's the first of a back-to-back for the Kraken. The second of 3 games over the course of 4 days for Seattle, all of them at home. December 9th versus the Tampa Bay Lightning is a 7 p.m. puck drop. That game is back on Root Sports. And then the next day, Sunday, December 10th versus the Minnesota Wild is a 6 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. Obviously, that one as well is on Root Sports. So big opportunity for Seattle. I mean, they've beaten Tampa Bay earlier. Minnesota's not going to be an easy team to beat. They've got some talent, and New Jersey, they've got a lot of talent as well. So